Yo, I've returned for part 3 of the greatest synth sound design tutorial of all time. And today we're going to talk about voicing, unison, envelopes, and LFOs. So let's do it, bro.
What is going on? Bro, how do I fix this? What the fuck?
So if you were not here for the previous video, which you definitely should have because we had a great time, we looked at the 4 main waveforms or shapes when it comes to generating sound.
Sine wave, the triangle wave, the square wave, and the saw wave.
We're going to extend it a little bit further by talking about voicings. So every single sound that I played in that video was singularly voiced. Sounds can be singularly voiced or have multiple voices, and voices basically represent how many copies of a sound is being played at the same time. So if you look here, we have currently Serum's init preset loaded right now, which has by default a saw wave with one voice, which means there's one copy of this saw wave being played that will be played when I'm gonna hit a note or whatever. Yeah, one copy. If I was to turn this up, for example 2, there's now 2 copies of the saw wave, and they're being played slightly differently. And that's where like the main thing with unison comes in, is that you have multiple copies of the same waveform being played in different ways. And what that kind of does is overall creates like a kind of effect where it fills more space in your headphones if you are wearing headphones. You can hear there's 2 copies of this saw wave being played slightly differently. 3, 4, 5, so on, right? And you can keep on going. In Serum, the maximum number of voices of unison you can have, so the most amount of copies of whatever's in your oscillator playing at the same time, is 16. 16 voices, 16 copies of this saw wave being played at the same time. And you can manipulate and change how these voices behave, where relative to each other and all in general, right? So you can see here we have this kind of visual representation of, here we have 5 voices of unison, where the primary voice is the longer yellow line, and the additional voices are all these green lines there. You can see they're all equally spaced out, and the green lines are slightly shorter than the orange line, the yellow line, which signifies that those additional voices are being played at a slightly lower volume than the yellow line. And you can manipulate this, as I just said. Detune here, this, you can see it's making the lines closer together or further apart. So this is kind of how far away the pitch of the voices are going to be from each other. You can, if I was to just show you here, you can see as I'm moving the knob to the right, it's getting more and more dissonant, it's sounding weirder. And then as I move it closer to the left, it's sounding more normal, I guess. If I was to turn this all the way to 0, you basically here have 5 copies of the exact same note that's playing, as opposed to here, you know, they're slightly spaced out or whatever. Yeah. You have blends. I was talking before about how this yellow primary line is longer than the green lines. If I was to move this blend to 100, you can see actually now this yellow line is shorter than the green lines, which means that the additional voices are going to be playing at a louder volume than the primary voice. But if I was to turn this to 0, you basically only are going to hear you're only going to hear the primary voice. You can do like a bit of a sweep here. You can see, or you can hear, you can see and hear, to be fair, because that visual representation does actually help quite a lot. But you can hear that as the knob is shifting further and further to the right, getting closer to 100, the additional voices are coming in and they're louder. Serum 2, you can actually do a little bit more than that. You have this cogwheel here. You can change the settings of unison, which makes it, you can do different things. And I won't get too much into that, but I think the most important one, or the most interesting one, is this mode here, where you can change, basically you're effectively changing how, like, what rules should the lines be spaced by beforehand. Yeah, this right now is in linear mode, which means that the lines are equally spaced from each other. But you could have it to be super, where you can see here the two lines right next to the primary voice are kind of closer. They're like, the gap between the primary voice and the first lines out is shorter than the gap between the first lines out and the second lines out. And if I was to change this even more, you could see this quite exaggerated here. I can even show, what's this, exponential is even more pronounced. You can see the ones next to the yellow line are really short, but then the gap gets larger and larger the further out away that you go from the yellow line. And you can even do, what's this, inverse modes, where now the gap between the lines closest to the yellow line are actually the biggest gaps, and the gaps get shorter the further away from the yellow line that you're going. This is slightly more advanced, but I think it was interesting to show it, at least because this is kind of not necessarily unique to Serum 2, but there's like not a lot of synths allow you to like change how the unison behaves. So I thought that was quite interesting to show. I think I started this off as a Serum 2 tutorial, so I might as well just show what Serum 2 can do, you know what I'm saying? Envelopes matter a lot. Envelopes basically control how your patch will behave, and I think the easiest way to explain this is with volume. Okay, right. So I was just editing this fucking video right now, and I realized that my fucking explanation of envelopes was so shit. So I'm gonna do it right now. This is it. This is what it is. Envelopes, they follow A, D, S, R. Attack, decay, sustain, release. That is what it is. And I was going to explain in the video with volume, because by default, most synths have their first envelope set to the volume of the first oscillator, right? So that's how I was going to do it. I was showing people, but I was showing it like I was a dickhead. So we're just going to imagine that there's some special amazing synth called Serum 2. Oh my god, we don't even need to imagine that. That's crazy. And it goes from 0 to 100 in terms of volume, right? Now, we can plot it on a graph. This is time, and then this is volume. What attack does, attack is the time that it takes for the synth to go from absolute silence, 0, up until its peak volume, which in this case is 100. You can mark up 100 on here, like this. That is attack. From the maximum point, from the peak, from 100, it will then go down to specific volume, and it will stay at that volume until you let go of the note. That volume that it stays at is the sustained volume. So this is S, and the time it takes to go from the peak volume to the sustained volume, that is the decay. That's D. And then when you let go of the note, it goes from the sustained volume down to 0, back to being silent again. That is the R. That is what ADSR is. That's all that it is. Serum 2 has a thing where you can go up to the max volume and then stay at the max volume before you decay back down to the sustained volume and then go down. If this is A, this is D, this point here is S, and then this is R again. This here is called H in Serum 2. This is hold. Hold, the hold time. The time that you spend at the max volume before going down to the sustained volume is the hold, and that is it. That is it. I have no clue why I fucked up explaining it so badly in the actual video, but yeah, that's it. Okay, fucking hell. And the final thing that we're going to talk about is the LFOs. LFO stands for low frequency oscillator, which means that they oscillate, they go up and down over and over again at a slow rate. These, in Serum, you have 3 modes for LFOs. It's basically to do with when it repeats. Retrigger, if you have, let's say, I'll put an LFO on the level here. With retrigger, this is going to go up and down, but it's only going to start going up and down when I press a note. When I let go, You can see there's a line that's following where the LFO currently is at. That only happens when the note's played. When the note is not played, it just restarts. It goes back to the beginning. 3, on the other hand, doesn't give a fuck about whether or not there's a note playing. It's just gonna keep on oscillating in the background. And I let go. You can see I let go of the note and then I play the note again. I did not go back to the beginning of the LFO. There was still sound playing. You can see the blue line is not being sent back to the beginning. It's still going. And envelope basically makes the LFO behave like the envelopes that we just talked about, where you kind of get like a kind of pseudo ADSR, and it will do this thing once, like an envelope. It will not re-trigger itself. It will do that thing once when the note is played, and then not again until the note gets played again. Which is different to the re-trigger, because the re-trigger will keep redoing the same thing until the note. I am so stupid. Why am I talking over the sound? Until the note gets let go of. And that's all there is to it, man. That's what I wanted to talk about today. That's actually, in those 3 videos, we have basically gone through all of the basics that we need to know in order to make 6 sounds. This is it. That's all the information that you need to be able to make shit that will sound nice from scratch. That's it. So congratulations, bro. You actually made it. You made it. This is the tutorial, bro. You made it out of the tutorial, and then we're gonna start with some beginner sounds in the next video, bro. Congratulations to you if you watched all 3 videos. You know, I appreciate you. That's it. I'm done. Fuck off, man.